In episode 68, Reporting Overall Risk Exposure, we turn our attention to how organizations bring the full picture of uncertainty into focus. Individual risks matter, but leadership needs to see the collective shape of exposure, the integrated story of what could affect objectives, performance, and confidence. A well-structured risk exposure report translates dozens of scattered entries into one coherent narrative. It shows the organization where attention is needed, what forces drive uncertainty, and whether current posture remains within comfort. When done well, this reporting bridges technical detail and executive insight, converting complexity into clarity that supports decision-making at every level. Before such reports can inform, overall risk must be clearly defined. It refers to the combined effect of all identified risks, both threats and opportunities, on the project, program, or enterprise. It is not a sum of scores, but an integrated judgment about exposure. Overall risk reflects interdependence. Multiple small risks in one area may collectively outweigh a single major one elsewhere. It also considers correlation, how certain events might amplify or offset each other. Defining overall risk gives meaning to the report, turning a list of issues into an assessment of how uncertainty could influence strategic success. Aggregation is key, but it should focus on themes rather than raw counts. Simply tallying risks provides no insight. Thematic aggregation groups risks by drivers, such as supply chain, technology, regulation, or workforce stability. It reveals concentrations of exposure that suggest systemic vulnerability. A dozen unrelated risks may look minor individually, but if most tie back to a single dependency, they demand attention. Theme-based aggregation aligns data with management intuition. It tells a story about patterns rather than incidents. This approach also allows comparisons over time, showing whether specific areas are strengthening or eroding in control. A strong exposure report highlights the top drivers and uncertainties shaping the risk landscape. Drivers are conditions that influence multiple risks, such as inflation, vendor reliability, or changing legislation. Uncertainties are areas where data is incomplete or volatile. Presenting these at the forefront focuses leadership on leverage points, the factors whose change would affect many outcomes simultaneously. This moves the conversation beyond what risks exist toward what conditions shape our destiny. Identifying key drivers sharpens strategy, helping decision-makers prioritize monitoring and resource allocation where they can influence the greatest portion of overall exposure. Temporal perspective matters. Every exposure report should separate near-term and long-horizon views. Near-term exposure concerns what may occur within the current reporting cycle, such as schedule delays or supplier disruptions. Long-horizon exposure looks further ahead, strategic risks like emerging technology shifts or regulatory transitions. This distinction clarifies urgency and planning horizon. It also balances reactivity with foresight, ensuring that leadership does not focus solely on immediate issues at the expense of structural vulnerabilities. Presenting both timelines side by side keeps attention distributed appropriately between today's fires and tomorrow's potential storms. No risk estimate is absolute. Mature exposure reporting expresses ranges rather than single numbers. Uncertainty by nature resists precision. Pretending otherwise erodes credibility. Ranges show the plausible spread of outcomes, acknowledging data limits while still providing guidance. This transparency helps executives weigh confidence levels realistically. A report that says expected cost impact between 2 and 5% invites discussion, while one that asserts 3% invites skepticism. Expressing ranges respects uncertainty, while reinforcing that analysis remains disciplined. It keeps conversation anchored in probability, not illusion of exactness. Risk exposure gains value only when tied explicitly to objectives. Each summary should show how uncertainty relates to key deliverables, budgets, schedules, or strategic outcomes. Without this linkage, data becomes abstract. When exposure is expressed as potential deviation from defined goals, how likely milestones may slip, how profits might narrow, how customer satisfaction could drop, it becomes actionable. Decision-makers engage more readily when they can see how risk aligns directly with what they are accountable for. Objective linkage turns risk reporting from background noise into strategic intelligence woven into everyday management dialogue. Comparison to appetite and tolerance lines provides context for interpretation. A risk report without reference points tells only half the story. Appetite defines how much uncertainty leadership is willing to accept in pursuit of value. Tolerance defines the operational boundaries before escalation is required. By comparing current exposure against these lines, the report signals whether action, acceptance, or escalation is appropriate. It transforms raw metrics into judgment. This step also reinforces governance alignment, showing that operational monitoring reflects strategic intent. Exposure measured without tolerance is like weather without a forecast, informative but unanchored. Trend perspective transforms snapshots into insight. Tracking whether overall exposure is improving, stable, or worsening over time reveals trajectory, not just status. Trend analysis highlights whether mitigations are working and whether external pressures are increasing. Visual trend summaries, simple arrows or traffic light patterns, allow quick comprehension even for complex data. The direction of change often matters more than the absolute number. When trends show improvement, leadership gains assurance. When they deteriorate, intervention becomes justified. Trend tracking converts static reports into living instruments of management dialogue and learning. Movement demands explanation. Every reported shift, whether improvement or regression, should include commentary on causes and assumptions. Did actions deliver expected impact? Did external conditions evolve? Were prior estimates too optimistic? Providing explanation builds credibility and learning. It prevents misinterpretation and helps calibrate future analysis. Without context, change becomes noise. With it, change becomes insight. The best reports read like detective stories: clear evidence, plausible reasoning, and a closing reflection on what was learned. This narrative transforms metrics into meaning, guiding both reflection and future planning. At its core, risk reporting exists to enable decisions, resource allocation, and trade-off discussion. Exposure without response is wasted analysis. Reports should end with a small set of questions. What choices must be made now? What funding or authority is required? And what can be deferred safely? These prompts ensure that attention translates into action. Framing results around decision needs makes the report relevant beyond the risk office. It turns data into dialogue, helping leadership exercise judgment rather than simply receive information. Reporting, done well, empowers strategic movement rather than passive awareness. Scenario presentation strengthens understanding of exposure shape. Scenarios translate abstract risk levels into tangible stories. If this trend continues, here's the likely outcome. If controls strengthen, here's the best case. Scenarios engage imagination while remaining analytical. They demonstrate consequence without dramatization. By illustrating expected outcomes under different conditions, reports help leaders see the practical impact of inaction versus adaptation. Scenarios also encourage cross-functional collaboration, as stakeholders can visualize how their domains interact under stress or recovery. Storytelling, grounded in data, transforms numbers into foresight. While summaries focus on clarity, detailed analysis still has value. Appendices provide a structured place for deep dive data, individual risk matrices, assumptions, and calibration notes. Keeping this material separate preserves readability while ensuring transparency. Executives can grasp the main narrative quickly, while analysts and auditors can trace evidence later. This layered structure, concise main brief, detailed annex, balances accessibility with rigor. It satisfies both communication and compliance needs. When designed properly, appendices reinforce confidence that nothing is hidden, only organized, allowing different audiences to engage at the depth they require. The ultimate purpose of an exposure report is action through understanding. A clear, concise summary of total risk allows leadership to respond with composure rather than reaction. It builds shared awareness of where the organization stands and what forces shape its stability. Exposure reporting is not a compliance chore. It is the map that shows where vigilance and investment must converge. When the picture of uncertainty is unified, teams move in harmony, confident that decisions are grounded in evidence. A strong exposure brief transforms complexity into capability, proving that insight, not volume, drives effective risk management. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.